Shalom, welcome to Challenging Torah, a project of the Malibu Jewish Center and Synagogue. Our challenge is the challenge of the book of Leviticus, which is really a book of a holiness code. The commentary in the Eitz Chaim Chumash gives us an interesting insight that says there are two kinds of holiness here. One is the holiness of times, ritualized, Pesach, Yom Kippur. These are ritualized times based on seasons and the rituals that we do to celebrate our times and changes in life. We know when they're going to come. And then there's death and birth, those moments when the mysteries are open to us. And how do we deal at those liminal doorways of mystery? This Torah portion, which one would think is, oh my God, so boring, they're going to give me a bunch of stuff that I don't want to know about, begins. Speak to the children of Israel. If a woman conceives and bears a male child, she shall be unclean 7 days. As in the days of her menstruation, she shall be unclean. Our first reaction is, what do you mean unclean? Oh, this is so old and yucky. And we realize that at this point, it was about life and death. And the idea that the menstruation contained the blood, which is always scary to them, things oozing out of place, contained a life that did not happen, and therefore was tameh, impure. All of Leviticus is how one turns tameh, impurity, into tahor, purity. And that's the ritual that is done. But when we look at this line again, we realize it's taken out of today's headlines. It could not be more relevant. First of all, it's a translation problem. Speak to the children of Israel, saying, if a woman conceives and bears a male child. Well, it depends on what translation you read. Or the translations read, when a woman gives birth, the more liberals, and bears a male child. When does life begin? 3,000 years later, we are attempting to legislate, not only ritualize, this very question. Judaism doesn't really spend a lot of time on this question. If you come right down to it, I would say that the majority come down on the side that life begins at birth, and frankly, you're not even supposed to have a funeral for either a fetus or a baby that has not reached a month old, which is really painful for mothers. We have gone over that line in modern times, and of course I perform a funeral. But this question of when does birth begin and abortion is not promoted in Judaism, but it doesn't take the focus that it has in modern Christianity, especially in your evangelical movements. Much more, Judaism worries about, how did you get here? It takes 3, it says, to make a baby. The Holy One, a father and a mother. That's the core of Judaism. And if you look into the Talmud in Nidah, there's a beautiful statement that says, know where you come from, know where you are going, and know where you are destined to give an account at the end of your days. And Rabbi Akiva says, know where you come from? A putrid drop of semen. So that place of when does conception or birth or life begin, Judaism is much more interested in life itself. As we go back into this opening piece, if a woman conceives or gives birth, Tazria means give seed, and they even believe that women also gave forth seed, and bears a male child, she is put into that state where she needed to cleanse her body, ritual purity, 7 days, and then 33 days she is to be at home, alone, with all the support of those around her, feeding her, but she's alone, bonding with this baby for 33 days. Even though at 8 days, they obviously take the child for circumcision. A woman gives birth to a female, it's double, it's 66 days. once again, in this mystery, we have landed exactly in modern times. And number one, on the top of the list in our democratic process right now, in the election cycle, is the question of paternity-maternity leave. Now, we would like to legislate that if a woman gives birth, she and her husband will have 3 months paid maternity leave. Or is it only 6 weeks? We're still dealing with this question. How do you have time for a parent to bond with a child? We have not yet solved that piece of legislation. And even the question of gender is taken right out of the headlines. I have the feeling that 3,000 years from now, since this is a 3,000-year-old text and we need to be in their headspace, they will look back and say how crude their gender place was. They only had male and female? Oh my God. They didn't understand human beings at all. And so as we look further in the portion, we get to the place that says, how do we bring those who are oozing in ways that are not right, a skin eruption or disease, how do we deal with that? Now this Torah portion, Tazria, then we'll blend into next week's Torah portion, Torah, and we will deal with it again. But the bottom line is that it's the priest, not a doctor, who deals through isolation. When a man shall have the skin of his flesh, a swelling, a scab, a bright spot, he's brought to Aaron the priest. And the way to deal was to put a person in quarantine. They understood contagion, and it was a great fear in the camp. And much like Ebola, that 3,000 years later we look at it, and it turns out that the only way to stop that particular plague was to put people in isolation. And all those places of tahara, of cleansing, the tameh, that someone is impure, if you handle a dead body, you need to purify both physically, hygienically, and spiritually. And so until they could convince people that they had to not do the usual ritual for burying their relatives with Ebola, it continued to spread. It was not just the doctor, but whoever was the tribal chieftain, whoever was in charge in the community, needed to make this plea to the gathered social group to go out of the boundaries of their normal ritual, not to touch the body. We'll continue this next week when we look at the portion that's usually pegged to this in Metzorah. But it's all still with us. Birth, death, the need to make boundaries, and the need to come into a place of acknowledging that there are things beyond our control, and through ritual to at least provide the boundaries that allow us to make a connection to that which is holy in a way that we can handle inside as well as outside. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.